I hadn't spoken to Rachel Hayes in exactly 2 years. Not after the divorce. Not after signing the papers. Not after promising each other that walking away was kinder than staying. I thought I'd never hear her voice again. Then, on a quiet Thursday evening, my phone rang. The screen showed a name I had deleted months earlier. Rachel. For a full 10 seconds, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to let it ring. The other part, the part one thought had disappeared with our marriage, answered. Hello. Silence. I almost thought the call had dropped. Then I heard her breathing. Finally, Lucas. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Hi. Hi. Another silence. Felt strangely familiar. Back when we were married, we used to fill silence with comfort. Toward the end, we filled it with distance. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, she said. So don't. The words came out colder than I intended. She didn't get angry. I probably deserve that. You probably do. I know. She took a slow breath. I'll leave you alone after this. I need one favor. I closed my eyes. Every instinct told me to end the call. What kind of favor? Her answer came so quietly, I almost thought I'd imagined it. I need you to pretend we're still married. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the last thing I expected to hear. I'm serious. I know. That's the problem. She didn't interrupt. Rachel. We signed divorce papers 2 years ago. I remember. So why would anyone think we're still married? They don't. Then who are we pretending for? Another pause. My family. I frowned. What? My parents are hosting our annual summer barbecue this Saturday. You remember it. Of course I remembered it. Every July, her entire family gathered at the same house. Her father grilled burgers. Her mother made too much potato salad. The kids played football in the backyard until sunset. It had been my favorite day of the year. Until it wasn't. They still think we're together, she said quietly. I sat upright. They what? I never told them. I blinked. You never told your own parents we got divorced? I know how that sounds. It sounds insane. I know. I stood and walked toward the kitchen, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Rachel. It's been 2 years. I know. You've seen them. I have. And every time. You let them believe I was still your husband? She didn't answer. That silence told me everything. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. I couldn't bring myself to break my father's heart. I leaned against the kitchen counter. None of it made sense. Rachel. Your parents live 40 minutes away. You've seen them dozens of times. What did you tell them every time they asked where I was? She let out a quiet sigh. I told them you were working. I rubbed a hand across my face. For 2 years. Yes. You expect me to believe they never questioned that? They did. And I kept making excuses. Business trips. Weekend projects. Construction deadlines. You know my dad. He always believed you worked too much. I couldn't even argue with that. Because he had. Back when we were married, Frank Hayes used to shake his head every Sunday afternoon. Lucas, he'd say, one day you'll realize buildings can wait. But people can't. At the time, I always smiled, promised I'd work less. Then Monday came, and I didn't. Rachel's voice pulled me back. I know this is unfair. That's one word for it. I also know you have every reason to say no. So why are you calling me? This time, she answered immediately. Because you're the only person I trust to do this. I laughed once. Barely. That's not exactly a compliment. It wasn't supposed to be. Silence. Then she surprised me. I'm sorry. Not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just, I'm sorry. For everything. Those 3 words hit harder than I wanted them to. During our divorce, we'd argued about furniture, money, the apartment, who kept the dog. Everything except the one thing that actually mattered. Neither of us had ever apologized. Until now. I stared through the kitchen window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. I don't understand. What? Why now? She hesitated. Then said quietly, my parents are celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary. I frowned. I thought you said it was the annual barbecue. It is. But this year, my dad invited the entire family. Cousins. Uncles. Everyone. I could almost picture it. The long wooden tables. Kids running through the yard. Frank standing behind the grill wearing the same faded baseball cap he'd owned for 15 years. Rachel's mother insisting everyone take seconds before they'd even finished their first plate. For a second, it didn't feel like 2 years had passed. Felt like last summer. I can't tell them now, Rachel whispered. Not with everyone there. You've had 2 years. I know. I was a coward. I closed my eyes. She wasn't making excuses. She wasn't blaming me. She was simply telling the truth. I'll tell them afterward. I promise. I need one afternoon. I let out a slow breath. You know what's bothering me? What? You didn't call because you miss me. She didn't answer. You called because you need an actor. Her silence lasted so long. I wondered if she'd hung up. Then she said, I called because... She stopped herself. When she spoke again, her voice was almost too quiet to hear. Because I couldn't imagine asking anyone else. Those words stayed with me. Not because they answered my question. Because they didn't. They only made it more complicated. Neither of us spoke. The rain outside filled the silence between us. Finally, I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind since she called. What really happened, Rachel? She sounded confused. What do you mean? You could have asked anyone. A friend. A coworker. Someone from college. You called your ex-husband. Why? Another long pause. When she finally answered, her voice carried the kind of honesty I hadn't heard in years. Because nobody knows me the way you do. I looked down at the wedding ring I no longer wore. Funny how your hand could forget its weight, but your heart couldn't. I don't know if that's a good reason. It isn't. It's just the truth. I walked into the living room. My apartment felt unusually quiet. There was a framed photograph on the bookshelf. Not of Rachel. I'd gotten rid of those after the divorce. This one showed a mountain lake I'd photographed 3 years earlier. She'd been standing beside me when I took it. I still remembered that day. I'll pick you up Saturday morning, Rachel said carefully. Lucas, I'm not saying yes. I know. I'm just telling you where I'll be. I almost smiled. She still did that. She still planned conversations 3 steps ahead. I'll think about it. Okay. If you say no, I'll understand. I probably deserve it. You keep saying that. Because it's true. I looked at the clock. 8:17 p.m. I have one question. Anything. If your parents think we're still married. What about your wedding ring? She didn't answer immediately. I still wear it when I visit them. I frowned. You kept it. Only there. And afterward, I put it back in the drawer. I didn't know why that bothered me. Maybe because I had sold mine almost a year ago. Not because I needed the money. Because every time I opened the drawer, felt like reopening the divorce. What about someone else? I asked. What if you've been dating someone? I haven't. You? No. Another silence. Different this time. Less awkward. More thoughtful. Rachel broke it first. Can I ask you something? I guess. Were you happy? The question caught me completely off guard. After us. I sat down on the couch. I thought about lying. It would have been easier. I got better at being alone. That's not what I asked. No. It isn't. She waited. No. I wasn't. I heard her exhale softly. I wasn't either. For a moment, neither of us sounded like exes. We sounded like 2 people who had spent 2 years pretending they'd moved on. Rachel cleared her throat. So, will you come? I looked around my apartment. Nothing in it had changed for months. The same couch. The same coffee table. The same quiet evenings. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I'd convinced myself that moving forward meant standing still. I'll come. I heard her inhale sharply. You will. One afternoon. That's all. I'll drive myself. And when it's over. It's over. I understand. You don't hug me. I won't. You don't call me honey. A tiny laugh escaped her. I wasn't planning to. And don't expect me to be convincing. She laughed again. The first real laugh I'd heard from her in years. I think we'll manage. Before hanging up, she became quiet once more. Lucas. Yeah. Thank you. This time, there was something different about the way she said it. Not relief. Not excitement. Gratitude. The kind that comes from someone who had almost given up asking. When the call ended, I placed my phone on the coffee table. For a long time, I simply stared at the black screen. Then I looked at the calendar on my wall. Saturday. 2 days away. I told myself I was helping an old friend. I told myself it was only one afternoon. I told myself nothing could possibly change after 2 years. Looking back, that was the biggest lie I told myself all weekend. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. At 10:02 a.m., a silver SUV pulled into the parking lot outside my apartment. I had been watching it from the window for almost a minute. Rachel stepped out first. She looked different. Not because she'd changed, because she looked exactly the way she always had on Saturdays. Blue jeans, a white sweater with the sleeves rolled up, white sneakers, her hair tied into the same loose ponytail she'd worn every summer we'd been together. For one strange second, it felt like time had folded in on itself. My phone buzzed. I'm outside. I grabbed my keys, took one last look around my apartment, then walked downstairs. Rachel was leaning against the driver's door when she saw me. Neither of us moved. Neither of us smiled. Hi. Hi. The word sounded oddly unfamiliar after 2 years. She looked me up and down. You still wear the same watch. I glanced at my wrist. I guess I do. It still runs 5 minutes fast. I smiled before I could stop myself. You noticed. I always noticed. That sentence lingered between us. She looked away first. You look good. So do you. You don't have to say that. I wasn't trying to be polite. She laughed quietly. I forgot you were terrible at lying. And I forgot you could still tell. For the first time, the awkwardness eased just a little. Rachel opened the passenger door. I'll drive. I figured. You still hate when other people drive. I still remember the panic attack you had when I parallel parked. I wasn't panicking. You grabbed the dashboard. It was supporting me emotionally. She laughed again. A real laugh. The kind that made the corners of her eyes wrinkle slightly. I'd forgotten that. I got into the passenger seat. The familiar scent of vanilla and coffee filled the car. Exactly the same air freshener. Exactly the same brand of coffee she'd always bought. You still drink hazelnut? She looked at me surprised. You remember? You drank it almost every morning. I guess some habits survive divorce. I guess they do. She pulled out of the parking lot. For the first few minutes, the drive was quiet. Not uncomfortable, just careful. Like neither of us wanted to step on a memory that might still hurt. Finally, Rachel broke the silence. I should probably tell you the rules. There are rules. There are a few. I sighed dramatically. Of course there are. She smiled. My parents think you couldn't make it to the last 2 barbecues because work kept getting in the way. Okay. My cousins will ask about your job. That's easy. My Aunt Linda will ask when we're having kids. I nearly choked. What? Rachel laughed. I told you. She asks every married couple. What did you tell her the last 2 years? That we were too busy. Ironic. A little. She looked ahead at the road. And... She hesitated. My dad. What about him? He'll probably hug you. I can survive that. He'll also probably call you son. Something tightened in my chest. Frank had called me that long before the wedding. The first time was after we'd spent an entire weekend building a deck behind their house. I corrected him. I'm not your son. He'd laughed. No, but you're close enough. I hadn't thought about that moment in years. Rachel noticed I'd gone quiet. You okay? Yeah. I was just remembering something. She nodded slowly. I've been doing a lot of that lately. The city disappeared behind us. Soon we were driving through quiet neighborhoods lined with old oak trees. Then came the familiar country roads. I recognized every turn, every gas station, Every little diner where we'd once stopped for pie because Rachel insisted road trips weren't complete without dessert. You know. She smiled without looking at me. I was wondering how long it'd take before you recognized this road. I recognized it 10 minutes ago. I figured. You still stop at Miller's Diner? Sometimes. The pie's still terrible. It always was. You still ordered it. You always finished it. She laughed. I forgot about that. No. You chose to. She looked at me. Only for a second. Then back at the road. Maybe she had. Or maybe, just like me, she'd been trying very hard not to remember. 20 minutes later, Rachel slowed the car. We're here. I looked through the windshield. Nothing had changed. The white two-story farmhouse still sat at the end of the long gravel driveway. The old oak tree still shaded half the front yard. The wooden swing Frank had built for his grandchildren still hung from the same thick branch. Cars already filled the driveway. I recognized several of them immediately. Rachel's brother, her Aunt Linda, her cousin Jake. Apparently, the whole family really was here. Rachel turned off the engine. For a moment, neither of us reached for the door. She looked down at the steering wheel. I know this is asking a lot. You've mentioned that. I mean it. I know. She smiled weakly. I've been nervous all morning. I noticed. I almost turned around twice. I noticed that too. She laughed. You still read me too easily. I never stopped. The smile disappeared from her face. Lucas. If at any point this feels like too much, just tell me. We'll leave. I looked at her. Together. She hesitated. Then nodded. Together. I don't know why, but hearing that single word made something inside me soften. I opened the passenger door. Let's get this over with. Rachel stepped out beside me. The moment our feet touched the gravel, the front door flew open. Lucas. Frank Hayes. Still wearing the same faded baseball cap. Still holding a pair of barbecue tongs like they were part of his hand. He crossed the yard surprisingly fast for a man in his 60s. Before I had time to react, he wrapped both arms around me. There he is. It's about time you stopped letting that company work you to death. I laughed awkwardly. It's good to see you too, Frank. He stepped back and looked me over. You've gotten thinner. Rachel immediately spoke. Dad. Don't start. I'm just telling the truth. He turned back to me. Rachel feeding you enough? I nearly looked at Rachel. Instead, I forced a smile. She's trying. Good answer. He slapped me on the shoulder. I always liked you. Rachel rolled her eyes. You say that every year. Because it's true every year. Before either of us could answer, a voice shouted from the porch. Lucas. Rachel's mother hurried toward us with a kitchen towel still draped over one shoulder. Without hesitation, she hugged me just as tightly as Frank had. Oh, sweetheart. It's so good to finally have you back. For one terrifying second, I forgot we were pretending, because nothing about those hugs felt fake. Not to them, not even to me. Rachel's mother stepped back and looked between us. I was beginning to think your office had stolen my son-in-law forever. Rachel smiled. I finally convinced him to take the weekend off. You certainly did. Her mother took Rachel's hand. Then mine. Come inside. Everyone's been waiting. As we walked toward the backyard, kids ran past us chasing a football. Someone was laughing near the grill. Country music played softly from an old speaker on the porch. The smell of charcoal, fresh burgers, and Rachel's mother's homemade barbecue sauce filled the air. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed this place. Jake spotted me first. Lucas. He walked over carrying 2 drinks. I was starting to think Rachel invented this mysterious husband. Rachel elbowed him. Be nice. I am. Jake handed me a bottle. Good to have you back, man. Then he leaned closer. So. He lowered his voice. You finally taking more vacation? Before I could answer, Rachel answered for me. I'm making sure he does. Jake pointed at her. Good. He never listened to the rest of us. Everyone laughed, including me, including Rachel. And for just a second, standing in the middle of that backyard, listening to the laughter, feeling completely at home, I caught myself forgetting the one thing I'd promised not to forget. This wasn't real. We were only pretending. The afternoon passed easier than I expected. Too easy. Frank stood behind the grill like a conductor leading an orchestra. Burgers are ready. Within seconds, half the family surrounded him. Rachel leaned closer to me. He still refuses to let anyone else touch the grill. I remember. He says everyone else burns the burgers. I've tasted Jake's cooking. He might have a point. She laughed. There you are. That laugh. I'd forgotten how much I missed hearing it. Not because it was loud. Because it was honest. Her cousin Emily walked over carrying a bowl of potato salad. Rachel, you finally got him to take a weekend off. Rachel smiled. It only took several years. Emily looked at me. You know. I always told Rachel she'd regret working as much as you. Rachel rolled her eyes. Thank you, Emily. What? I'm helping. No. You're definitely not. Everyone laughed, including Emily. As we walked toward one of the picnic tables, Rachel accidentally bumped into me. I'm sorry. It's okay. No. She looked up at me. I mean, for everything. I looked at her. She wasn't talking about bumping into me. I knew that. Before I could answer, Frank's voice interrupted us. Lucas. I turned. Come here for a second. He was standing beside the old wooden shed near the garage. The same place where we'd spent an entire weekend building shelves years ago. I'll be right back, I told Rachel. She nodded. I'll save you a burger. I appreciate the sacrifice. I know. I followed Frank toward the shed. He opened the old wooden door. Nothing inside had changed. The same workbench. The same rusty toolbox. The same fishing rods leaning in the corner. He picked up 2 folding chairs. Handed one to me. Sit down, son. That word. Son. It still felt strangely natural coming from him. For a minute, neither of us spoke. He looked out toward the backyard. The laughter. The music. Rachel talking with her cousins. Then he smiled. You know. I've been watching you 2 all afternoon. My stomach tightened. I forced a casual smile. Oh, you 2 haven't changed. I wasn't sure whether that was good or bad. Frank chuckled. Rachel still finishes your sentences. I blinked. What? And you still hand her a drink before she realizes she's thirsty. I frowned. Had I done that? I honestly couldn't remember. Apparently, I had. Frank leaned back in his chair. Funny thing about people who've loved each other. They never completely forget the little things. I looked toward the backyard. Rachel was laughing with her mother. She looked happier than she'd sounded on the phone 2 days ago. Frank spoke again. You know why I always liked you? I smiled. I assumed it was my burger flipping skills. He laughed. They were terrible. I knew it. But. His smile slowly faded. You always looked at my daughter like she was the only person in the room. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet. He kept looking toward the backyard. Most men stop doing that after a few years. You never did. His words landed somewhere deep inside me, because I realized something uncomfortable. Even now, 2 years after our divorce, I'd spent almost the entire afternoon watching Rachel. Without even noticing. Frank didn't look at me. He kept his eyes on the backyard. Rachel was helping her mother carry another tray of food onto the table. The wind caught a loose strand of her hair. She tucked it behind her ear, exactly the way she always used to. Frank smiled to himself. You still noticed. I looked at him. What? He chuckled quietly. She fixes her hair every time she's nervous. You looked before she even moved. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Because he was right. I guess old habits die hard, I said. Frank nodded slowly. They do. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. Then he stood. Come with me. He walked toward the old garage. I followed him inside. The smell of wood, gasoline, and old tools hadn't changed. He reached onto a shelf and pulled down a dusty photo album. I found this while cleaning last month. He handed it to me. I opened the first page. My chest tightened. There we were, Rachel and I, covered in paint after helping them renovate the kitchen. The next picture, Christmas. Rachel asleep on my shoulder. Another. The two of us holding the world's ugliest gingerbread house. I laughed despite myself. I remember that. Frank smiled. Rachel insisted it looked artistic. It looked like it survived an earthquake. That's exactly what I told her. We both laughed. Then the laughter faded. I slowly turned another page. Wedding photos. Rachel looking at me instead of the camera. I'd never noticed that before. Frank spoke quietly. You know. People always ask what happened. I looked up. What do you tell them? He shrugged. I tell them I don't know. And it's the truth. He looked directly at me. You two never hated each other. No. You never cheated. No. You weren't cruel. No. So I could never understand why it ended. Neither could I. Not anymore. Back then, everything had seemed so obvious. Deadlines. Long hours. Missed anniversaries. Arguments over nothing. Silence that lasted longer each month. Looking back, none of it seemed big enough to destroy a marriage. Frank rested one hand on the workbench. I watched your marriage the way fathers do. I stayed out of it. It wasn't my place. But I noticed something. I waited. You both kept trying to win. His words caught me off guard. What? You argued to be right. Not to understand. I stared at the old photographs. He wasn't wrong. Not once. Rachel would explain how lonely she felt. I'd explain why work mattered. Neither of us ever answered the other. We just defended ourselves. Over and over and over again. Frank sighed. I've been married 35 years. You know the secret? I smiled faintly. I'm guessing it's not barbecue. He laughed. Definitely not. Then his expression became serious again. The happiest couples I know aren't the ones who never argue. They're the ones who remember they're on the same team. The garage suddenly felt very quiet, because I couldn't remember the last time Rachel and I had acted like teammates. Toward the end, we behaved like opponents keeping score. Frank looked back toward the house. Rachel was laughing with one of her nieces. He smiled. She's laughed more today than I've seen her laugh in a very long time. He looked at me again. And I don't think that's a coincidence. Those words stayed with me as we walked back toward the backyard. For the first time all day, I wasn't wondering whether we could keep pretending. I was wondering something far more dangerous. What if we'd stopped pretending hours ago? Dinner was louder than ever. 3 long picnic tables had been pushed together across the backyard. Kids argued over who got the biggest burger. Aunt Linda insisted everyone needed another helping. Frank refused to let anyone touch the grill. Some traditions apparently survived everything. Rachel sat beside me, not because we planned it, because someone had naturally left the 2 empty chairs together. At one point, Aunt Linda smiled at us. You two still sit exactly the same way. Rachel looked confused. What do you mean? Linda pointed with her fork. Close enough to steal food from each other's plates. Rachel looked down. My fries were somehow already on her plate. She immediately laughed. I didn't even notice. I did, I said. She picked up one fry. Habit, I guess. She held it toward me. You want this one back? I shook my head. You never gave them back before. She smiled. I was hoping you'd forgotten. I remember everything involving French fries. The table burst into laughter. Frank pointed at me. See, I told you nothing changes. Rachel looked down, smiling into her drink. For the first time all day, she looked relaxed. Not like someone pretending, like someone who had finally stopped worrying. After dinner, the kids organized a football game. Jake walked over carrying the ball. Lucas, we're short one player. Rachel immediately looked at me. Oh no. What? You still think you're 25? I was 29. Exactly. Jake tossed me the football. You playing or getting old? Caught it. Rachel folded her arms. Don't encourage him. Jake grinned. Too late. 20 minutes later, I was sprinting across the yard while 3 children chased me like I had stolen Christmas. Throw it. I'm trying. One of the boys grabbed my shirt. Another wrapped himself around my leg. I collapsed dramatically onto the grass. Everyone cheered like we'd won the Super Bowl. Rachel walked over laughing so hard she could barely stand. I forgot how competitive you are. I let them win. You absolutely did not. I strategically lost. Lucas, you tackled a 10-year-old. He tackled me first. She laughed again. The kind of laugh that made everyone around her smile. Frank watched from the porch. I noticed him nudging his wife with his elbow. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. When the game ended, I sat on the edge of the wooden deck trying to catch my breath. Rachel handed me a bottle of water. Thanks. She sat beside me. Not too close. Not too far. We watched the kids continue playing in the yard. You know. She spoke without looking at me. I forgot this version of you. What version? The one who isn't working. I unscrewed the bottle. I forgot him too. She looked at me. That's sad. It is. We sat quietly for another minute. Then she asked, Can I tell you something? You've been doing that all day. She smiled. I almost canceled this. I know. No. I almost canceled because I was afraid. Of what? She looked out toward the old oak tree. That we'd spend the entire day remembering why we divorced. I waited. But, she smiled faintly, all I've remembered is why I married you. Her words hit me so unexpectedly, I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't have anything to say, because for the first time in 2 years, I realized I had been remembering exactly the same thing. The sun was beginning to set. Golden light stretched across the backyard. One by one, people started packing leftovers into containers. The younger kids were chasing fireflies. Someone turned the music down. The noise of the afternoon slowly faded into quiet conversations. Rachel looked at me. Want to take a walk? I nodded. We followed the narrow path behind the house, past the old barn, past the vegetable garden her mother still insisted on planting every spring. Eventually, we reached the small wooden dock overlooking the lake. Neither of us spoke at first. The water reflected the orange sky. Rachel rested both hands on the railing. I've missed this place. So have I. She smiled. I wasn't talking about the lake. I looked at her. I know. She let out a slow breath. I lied earlier. About what? When you asked why I called you. I waited. It wasn't because I needed someone to pretend. She looked down at the water. It was because you're still the first person I think of when something matters. Those words landed harder than anything she'd said all day. I swallowed. Rachel. She shook her head. Please. Let me finish. I nodded. For 2 years. I kept telling myself divorcing you was the right decision. I repeated it so many times that eventually I almost believed it. She laughed quietly. But every promotion, every birthday, every Christmas, every bad day, I still wanted to call you. I looked away, because I'd done exactly the same thing. More times than I wanted to admit. She turned toward me. Do you know what the worst part was? What? I stopped fighting for us. Before I stopped loving you. Silence. Just the sound of the water against the dock. Finally, I spoke. I wasn't any better. She frowned slightly. I thought if I worked harder, everything else would somehow fix itself. It didn't. I kept choosing meetings, deadlines, projects. I thought I was building our future. I laughed bitterly. I didn't realize I was missing our present. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. You know what hurt the most? What? Near the end. I didn't feel like your wife anymore. I felt like someone waiting for you to come home. Every word was true, painfully true. I stepped closer. Only one step. I'm sorry. She looked at me, not surprised, just listening. I'm sorry I kept believing there would always be another dinner, another weekend, another anniversary. I acted like time was unlimited. It wasn't. A tear rolled down her cheek. I waited for those words for 2 years. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a handkerchief. She laughed through her tears. You still carry one? You always cried during sad movies. You used to make fun of me. I still do. She smiled. You really do. Without thinking, I gently wiped the tear from her cheek. She didn't pull away. Instead, She leaned into my hand for just a second. I've missed you, Lucas. The words were barely louder than a whisper. I smiled sadly. I never stopped missing you. She closed her eyes, then opened them again. So, what happens now? I looked back toward the house. Frank was laughing with the kids. Her mother was waving goodbye to relatives. Life was moving forward, whether we wanted it to or not. I looked back at Rachel. I don't know, but for the first time in 2 years, I'd like to find out. She smiled, a real one, the same smile I'd fallen in love with years ago, and somehow felt even more beautiful now. We stood there for what felt like forever. Neither of us seemed ready to walk back. Rachel smiled through the last traces of tears. You know, I kept wondering what I'd say if this moment ever happened. And I had an entire speech prepared. I laughed. Really? She nodded. It was very dramatic. What happened to it? She shrugged. I forgot all of it the second you apologized. I smiled. Good. It probably wasn't very good. She lightly nudged my shoulder. It was excellent. I'll never know. No, you won't. We started walking back toward the house. Slowly. Neither of us rushed. Halfway there, Rachel reached for my hand. Not because we needed to pretend anymore. Because she wanted to. Our fingers intertwined naturally, like they'd remembered before we did. When we reached the backyard, Frank looked up from the grill. His eyes immediately dropped to our hands. A slow smile spread across his face. He didn't say anything. He simply looked at his wife. She followed his gaze, then smiled too. Rachel laughed quietly. They noticed. I think they noticed 5 minutes ago. Frank walked over carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. He handed one to me, one to Rachel, then looked at both of us. So, I braced myself. He smiled. I was wrong. Rachel frowned. About what? He chuckled. I spent all day thinking you two were pretending. He looked at me, then at Rachel. You weren't pretending at all. Neither of us answered, because there was nothing left to deny. Frank nodded once. I've been married 35 years. I've learned something. When 2 people stop loving each other, they stop looking for each other. He pointed toward us. You two have spent this entire day searching every room until you found the other. Rachel looked down. Frank smiled warmly. So whatever happened 2 years ago, don't let pride steal another 2. He gently squeezed my shoulder, then walked back toward the house, leaving us standing there together. Rachel looked at me. He always knows exactly what to say. I think that's why everyone listens. She nodded. I think you're right. The last guests began leaving. Cars disappeared down the gravel road one by one. Soon, only Frank and his wife remained on the porch. Rachel looked at me. So, what now? I smiled. This time, I'm not letting work answer that question. She laughed softly. No. I took a slow breath. Rachel Hayes. I don't know whether we'll get everything right. I don't know whether it'll be easy. But I know one thing. She waited. I don't want to spend another 2 years wondering what would have happened if we'd simply talked. A tear escaped before she could stop it. She stepped closer. So, is this the part where you kiss me? I smiled. I was hoping you'd interrupt me. She laughed. Then I kissed her. Not because we were pretending. Not because her family expected it. Not because of old memories. Because after 2 years apart, we had finally stopped acting like strangers. When we pulled apart, forehead against forehead, Rachel whispered, "Welcome home." For the first time in a very long time, the word felt exactly right. 6 months later, the annual summer barbecue came around again. This time, nobody needed to pretend. Frank flipped burgers. Rachel's mother made too much potato salad. The kids still tackled me during football. Some traditions never changed. As I stood beside Rachel on the back porch, Frank walked past us carrying another tray of burgers. He grinned. I knew you'd find your way back. Rachel slipped her hand into mine. So did I. I looked at her. Really? She smiled. No, but I never stopped hoping. I kissed her forehead. The laughter of her family filled the backyard. and for the first time in years, it no longer felt like I was visiting, felt like I had finally come home. What would you have done if your ex asked you to pretend you were still married? Could one day together change everything? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.